There was a time when Evelyn Carter believed that love and sacrifice naturally earned respect. She had spent decades building a comfortable life alongside her late husband, George, pouring every spare dollar into the warm two-story home they proudly called their own. Every room carried memories of birthdays, family dinners, Christmas mornings, and quiet evenings spent planning for the future. After George passed away, the house became more than just a place to live. It became a reminder of the promises they had fulfilled together. Every piece of furniture had a story. Every photograph captured another chapter of their lives, and every carefully restored antique reflected George's patient craftsmanship. That was why Evelyn never imagined anyone would one day treat her home as though she no longer belonged inside it. The first warning came on a gloomy November afternoon. Rain tapped steadily against the windows as Evelyn carefully polished a brass lamp sitting on the walnut console table in the front hallway. The table had been George's favorite restoration project, one he had spent weeks sanding and refinishing until every inch gleamed. The front door suddenly flew open. Without bothering to wipe her wet boots, Olivia Carter marched inside and tossed her soaked coat across the polished floor. Behind her, Evelyn's son, Ryan, entered quietly with several grocery bags hanging from both hands. His shoulders were slumped, and his eyes stayed fixed on the floor. Olivia glanced toward the antique table with visible annoyance. "Why is this old thing still sitting here?" she asked sharply. "The entrance looks cluttered. Nobody decorates like this anymore." Evelyn calmly folded her polishing cloth before answering. "That table has stood in this hallway for over 30 years. Olivia shrugged. "Then it's overdue for replacing." Her voice carried the confidence of someone giving instructions rather than making suggestions. She folded her arms and looked directly at Evelyn. "This house needs to move forward. Ryan and I are running things now. You should really let us make these decisions." The words settled heavily between them. Evelyn slowly turned toward her son. Ryan shifted awkwardly, pretending to adjust the grocery bags. He said nothing. Not one word. The silence hurt more than Olivia's criticism. Instead of arguing, Evelyn placed the lamp exactly where it belonged and quietly walked upstairs. Inside her bedroom, she unlocked the top drawer of her oak desk. Resting inside was a thick folder containing the original deed to the property. Only one name appeared on it: Evelyn Carter. She ran her fingertips across the document before locking it away again. Some boundaries, she realized, needed to remain firmly protected. The following morning began like every other. At precisely 6 o'clock, Evelyn walked downstairs, expecting the peaceful routine she had followed for decades. Instead, she found Olivia sitting at the kitchen island surrounded by paperwork and an open laptop. Without even looking up, Olivia spoke. "Ryan needs your sewing room." Evelyn poured herself a glass of water. "My sewing room? He'll be working from home more often," Olivia replied. "We're turning it into his office before the end of the week." Evelyn remained composed. "When you both moved back last year, we agreed that room would stay mine." Olivia finally looked up. "Plans change. It's where I keep everything I use. You can move it to the basement. The basement isn't suitable." Olivia closed her laptop with a loud snap. "You hardly use that equipment anyway." "I use it every week. Then maybe it's time to let it go." Again, Ryan remained silent. He entered the kitchen halfway through the conversation, grabbed a cup of coffee, listened for a few moments, and quietly walked back out without offering an opinion. That silence told Evelyn everything she needed to know. Little by little, her personal space had been disappearing. First, Olivia rearranged the living room without asking. Then she boxed away several family decorations because they looked old-fashioned. The guest cabinet was emptied to make room for Olivia's dinnerware. Now her sewing room was next. Every change was presented as practical. Every objection was dismissed as stubbornness. By evening, Evelyn had made a decision. She drove alone to a hardware store several miles away. Among the shelves of tools and locks, she selected a heavy-duty deadbolt designed for interior doors. Back home, she spent nearly 2 hours installing it on her bedroom door. She tested the lock twice before slipping the key into her pocket. If the rest of the house slowly stopped feeling like hers, one room would remain untouched. Late Thursday afternoon, someone knocked gently. "Evelyn?" Ryan's voice sounded uncertain. She unlocked the door. His eyes immediately drifted toward the new deadbolt. "Olivia tried moving your dresser," he admitted. "She couldn't get inside. My room contains my belongings," Evelyn answered evenly. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. "Don't you think locking the door is a little extreme?" "No," he hesitated. "Olivia is only trying to organize things." Evelyn looked at her son for a long moment. Organization doesn't require permission to erase someone else's place. Ryan opened his mouth as if to respond. Instead, he quietly lowered his eyes. Without another word, Evelyn stepped back into her room. The lock clicked firmly into place. For the first time in many years, she understood something with perfect clarity. The greatest threat to her home wasn't coming from strangers. It was already living under her roof. Winter settled over the neighborhood with icy mornings and long, quiet evenings. Frost coated the lawn each day, and the furnace hummed constantly, filling the house with a comforting warmth that contrasted sharply with the growing tension inside. Evelyn had begun keeping to herself. She prepared her own meals, cleaned only her personal spaces, and spent more time reading in her bedroom than sitting in the family room. The distance wasn't created out of anger. It was simply the only way she could preserve her peace. One Thursday morning, she walked into the kitchen to organize the monthly utility bills. For decades, she had handled every household payment without fail. Even after Ryan and Olivia moved in, she had continued paying the taxes, insurance, and maintenance without asking for a cent. As she opened the kitchen cabinet, a large envelope caught her attention. It was addressed to Ryan and Olivia from a local real estate office. At first, she intended to leave it alone. Then she noticed the return label. Curiosity overcame hesitation. Inside were glossy brochures, estimated property values, and suggested renovations designed to increase resale profit. Her eyes stopped on a single sentence highlighted near the bottom of one page. "We look forward to listing your property after ownership documents have been completed." Evelyn slowly lowered the papers onto the kitchen table. A few moments later, Olivia walked in wearing her winter coat. The moment she noticed the document spread across the table, her expression tightened. "You shouldn't be looking through our mail," Olivia said coldly. Evelyn met her gaze without raising her voice. "I wasn't searching for your personal business." She tapped one of the pages. "This concerns my home." Olivia stepped closer. "It's only planning. Planning to sell my house? We're thinking about the future." Evelyn remained seated. "The future belongs to the people who earn it." Olivia folded her arms. "This place is too much for one person. I've managed it for years. You won't want a house this size forever. And who decided that?" Olivia smiled, though there was little warmth behind it. "Ryan is your only child. Eventually everything becomes his anyway. We're simply preparing ahead." Evelyn carefully returned every page to the envelope. "My future hasn't been decided by anyone except me." Without another word, she picked up her coat and walked outside. Instead of driving home after leaving the neighborhood, Evelyn headed toward the lakeside park where she and George had often spent Sunday afternoons. The water was gray beneath the cloudy sky. She sat alone inside her car, watching small waves roll onto the frozen shoreline. For the first time, she admitted something she had refused to believe. Ryan and Olivia weren't treating the house like a temporary place to stay. They were treating it as though it already belonged to them. Her generosity had slowly become their expectation. That realization hurt far more than she expected. An hour later, she drove downtown. Her destination was the office of Richard Lawson, the attorney who had managed her family's legal affairs for over 2 decades. He greeted her warmly. "It's good to see you, Evelyn." She smiled politely before taking a seat. "I need to review my property documents." Richard opened her file. "Everything remains exactly as you left it. You're the sole owner, and the house is held entirely in your name. I also want to understand my legal rights." His expression grew more serious. "Has something happened?" Evelyn took a slow breath. "My son and his wife believe this house is already theirs." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "As the owner, you have complete authority over who lives there." She looked directly at him. I want to prepare a formal 90-day notice requiring them to move. For a brief moment, the office became completely silent. Are you certain? Richard asked gently. They're family. They're also adults. Richard studied her face before reaching for another folder. If this is your decision, we'll make sure everything follows state law. For the next hour, they reviewed every document carefully. Nothing would be rushed. Nothing would be emotional. Everything would be handled legally and respectfully. When Evelyn finally left the office carrying a sealed envelope, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Relief. During the following weeks, her routine changed completely. She joined a local gardening volunteer group that met 3 mornings each week. She reconnected with old friends she hadn't seen in years. On Friday evenings, she attended a neighborhood book club instead of spending another awkward dinner at home. The more she invested in her own life, the less control Olivia seemed to have over her emotions. Ryan eventually noticed. One evening, he stopped her near the front door. "You're hardly home anymore. I've been busy. We miss having dinner together." Evelyn smiled gently. "I wasn't aware anyone noticed." Ryan looked uncomfortable. "We're still family." She adjusted her coat. "Families show appreciation." He hesitated before speaking again. "We were hoping to stay here another year or 2 while saving money." Evelyn nodded. "I assumed that was always the plan." Ryan forced a nervous laugh. "Actually, Olivia thought maybe we could eventually take over the house." Evelyn looked directly into her son's eyes. "There is nothing to take over." His smile disappeared. "You mean? I mean, this home isn't changing ownership." Ryan stood speechless. For the first time, uncertainty replaced confidence. Evelyn quietly opened the front door. "I hope both of you begin making other arrangements." She stepped outside into the crisp evening air, leaving Ryan standing silently behind her. Inside the pocket of her coat rested the sealed legal notice. She prayed she would never have to use it. But if respect continued disappearing from her home, she already knew exactly what would happen next. By the end of January, the atmosphere inside the house had become impossible to ignore. Conversations were brief, meals were eaten separately, and silence had replaced the warmth that once filled every room. Olivia no longer tried to hide her intentions. She rearranged furniture without asking, replaced framed family photographs with abstract artwork, and spoke openly about renovations as though the property already belonged to her and Ryan. Evelyn refused to argue. Instead, she quietly removed her treasured photographs from the hallway, wrapped them carefully in protective paper, and stored them safely inside her locked bedroom. If they couldn't be respected on the walls, they would remain protected until the right time came. One Sunday afternoon, Olivia invited her parents over for lunch. The aroma of roasted chicken drifted through the kitchen as guests arrived carrying bottles of sparkling cider and homemade desserts. Evelyn greeted them politely before making herself a cup of tea. As she stood near the kitchen counter, she overheard Olivia leading her parents through the house like a proud homeowner showing off a recent purchase. "We're planning to open this wall next spring," Olivia said confidently, pointing toward the dining room. "An open concept layout will make everything brighter." Her father nodded thoughtfully. "It would certainly modernize the place." Olivia smiled. "Exactly. Most of the house feels outdated anyway." Her mother glanced toward Evelyn. "And where will Evelyn stay while all this work is happening?" Olivia answered without hesitation. "We've been looking into retirement communities nearby. She'll be much more comfortable somewhere designed for seniors." Evelyn slowly lifted her teacup. She wasn't offended. She was disappointed. Walking a few steps closer, she smiled politely. "It's remarkable how many plans you've made for a house that doesn't belong to you." The room fell silent. Olivia's smile disappeared. "What did you say? You heard me." Evelyn's voice remained calm. "I hope everyone enjoys lunch." Without another word, she carried her tea upstairs. Later that evening, after Olivia's parents had gone home, the tension finally erupted. Olivia waited in the hallway, with her arms crossed. Ryan stood several feet behind her, looking exhausted. "You embarrassed me today," Olivia snapped. "I answered a question honestly. You've been difficult ever since we moved in." "I've been respectful." Olivia laughed bitterly. You've been passive-aggressive. Evelyn folded her hands. I've simply stopped allowing people to make decisions for me. Olivia stepped closer. This house needs to move forward. It already has. No. Olivia shook her head. You refuse to let go. Evelyn looked toward Ryan. He avoided her eyes. Aegon. You've had years to enjoy this place, Olivia continued. Ryan and I are trying to build a future. Instead of helping us, you're standing in the way. Ryan shifted uneasily. Olivia, she interrupted him immediately. No, I'm tired of pretending. Turning back to Evelyn, she spoke with complete certainty. This isn't really your family anymore. The words echoed through the hallway. Olivia continued. Ryan and I are building the future here. You're just making everything harder. Evelyn remained perfectly still. Then Olivia delivered the sentence that changed everything. I think it's time for you to move out. Ryan closed his eyes. Still, he said nothing. Not one word. Evelyn studied her son's face. She searched for the young man she had raised, the boy who once defended classmates from bullies, the teenager who promised he would always look after her. She couldn't find him. Only silence stood where courage should have been. Finally, Evelyn nodded once. Wait here. She calmly climbed the staircase. Inside her bedroom, she unlocked the desk drawer and removed 2 envelopes. The first contained the original deed to the house. The second held the legal documents Richard Lawson had prepared weeks earlier. She paused briefly before walking downstairs. Every step felt lighter than the last. When she entered the hallway, Olivia wore a confident smile, clearly expecting an apology. Instead, Evelyn placed both envelopes on the entry table. What's this? Olivia asked. The first document, Evelyn replied, is the deed showing who owns this property. Olivia frowned while opening it. Ryan leaned closer. Neither of them spoke. My name is the only one listed, Evelyn continued quietly. She then rested her hand on the second envelope. And this is your official 90-day notice to vacate the premises. Olivia's face drained of color. What? You have until the end of April to move. This has to be some kind of joke. It isn't. Ryan stared at his mother in disbelief. Mom, Evelyn finally looked directly at him. I welcomed both of you into my home because you needed help saving for your future. Her voice never rose. I did not invite you here so you could erase my place in my own house. Olivia shook her head furiously. You can't force us out. I've already spoken with my attorney. She pointed calmly toward the documents. Everything has been filed according to state law. Ryan slowly picked up the notice. His hands trembled as he read each page. We actually have to leave, yes. Silence filled the hallway once more. This time, however, it carried a very different meaning. For months, Olivia had believed control belonged to whoever spoke the loudest. She had never imagined the quietest person in the house had already prepared the final answer. Without another word, Evelyn turned toward the staircase. She walked upstairs, entered her bedroom, and locked the deadbolt behind her. The solid click echoed through the silent house. For the first time since George's passing, Evelyn felt completely certain that she had protected not only her home, but also her dignity. The days following the legal notice were unlike anything Evelyn had experienced before. The cheerful confidence that had once filled the house vanished almost overnight. Olivia spent the first morning pacing through the living room with the eviction notice clutched tightly in her hand. She read every page repeatedly, searching for a mistake that wasn't there. There has to be a way around this, she muttered. Ryan sat silently at the dining table, staring at the paperwork. His coffee had long since gone cold. Finally, Olivia slammed the papers onto the table. She's bluffing. Ryan looked up. Mom doesn't bluff, then we'll fight it. Ryan rubbed his forehead. The attorney's letter says everything has already been filed. Olivia folded her arms. She's your mother. She won't actually throw us out. Ryan didn't answer. Deep down, he knew better. Meanwhile, Evelyn refused to let the tension consume her. She continued volunteering 3 mornings a week at the community botanical garden, where she spent hours pruning roses, planting seasonal flowers, and chatting with other volunteers. For the first time in months, she found herself smiling without effort. When she returned home each afternoon, she greeted Ryan and Olivia politely but briefly. No arguments, no lectures, no resentment. only quiet dignity. Her calm unsettled Olivia far more than anger ever could. One evening, Olivia cornered Ryan in the kitchen. "She's acting like nothing happened." Ryan sighed. "What do you expect her to do? She should feel guilty." Ryan looked at his wife in disbelief. "Guilty?" "Yes, for asking us to leave her own house?" Olivia hesitated for a second before answering. "We've lived here long enough for it to feel like ours." Ryan slowly shook his head. Feeling doesn't change ownership. It was the first time he had openly disagreed with her. Olivia noticed. "So now you're taking her side?" "I'm looking at facts." She stormed out of the kitchen without another word. The following weekend, Ryan began searching online for apartments. Reality arrived faster than either of them expected. Every rental required security deposits. Most landlords wanted references. Monthly rent was considerably higher than they had imagined. Then came moving expenses, deposits, insurance, furniture they didn't own because they had always relied on Evelyn's. Ryan stared at the calculator on his phone. "We're nowhere near ready." Olivia remained stubborn. "We'll manage." "But we could have been ready." She frowned. "What does that mean?" Ryan looked at her quietly. "If we'd actually been saving instead of planning renovations for a house that wasn't ours." He stopped speaking. The sentence didn't need finishing. Evelyn overheard none of these conversations. She deliberately stayed out of their private discussions. Instead, she focused on reclaiming the routines she had abandoned over the past year. She began baking again. Fresh bread filled the kitchen with comforting aromas. She placed flowers on the dining table. She reopened the piano that had remained untouched since George's passing. One evening, soft music drifted through the hallway. Ryan paused outside the living room. He hadn't heard his mother play in years. For a moment, memories flooded back. He remembered sitting beside her as a child while she practiced old melodies. He remembered George smiling proudly from his favorite armchair. He remembered a home filled with laughter instead of tension. Only then did he fully understand what had been slipping away. Several days later, Ryan knocked gently on Evelyn's bedroom door. "Come in," she said. He entered slowly. "I wanted to apologize." Evelyn closed the book she was reading. "For what?" "For staying quiet." She remained silent. "I should have spoken up the first time Olivia disrespected you." "You should have." "I kept telling myself it wasn't serious." Evelyn nodded. "Silence often encourages disrespect." Ryan lowered his head. "I thought avoiding conflict would keep everyone happy. It rarely does. I'm sorry." She studied her son's face. The arrogance she'd seen over the previous months was gone. In its place stood a man burdened by regret. "I appreciate your apology," she said softly, "but apologies don't erase choices. I know. I hope you learn from this." Ryan nodded slowly. "I already have." The weeks passed quickly. Boxes began appearing throughout the house. Closets were emptied, bookshelves grew bare. The excitement that Olivia once felt about redesigning the home had completely disappeared. She rarely spoke. Instead, she packed in silence. Each taped box seemed to remind her that confidence built on entitlement could disappear just as quickly as it arrived. Evelyn watched without satisfaction. She hadn't wanted things to end this way. She had simply refused to surrender her independence. One afternoon, she stood by the front window watching snow melt beneath the warm spring sunlight. George had always believed that people revealed their true character when life became difficult. Looking back over the past several months, Evelyn realized he had been right. She had discovered not only the weaknesses of those around her, but also her own strength. No matter how painful the experience had been, she no longer questioned her decision. Some lessons could never be taught through words alone. Sometimes, people only understood the value of respect after losing the privilege they had taken for granted. March arrived with longer days and warmer afternoons. The last patches of snow disappeared from the yard, replaced by fresh green grass and budding trees. Outside, everything seemed to be beginning again. Inside the house, however, every room reflected an ending. Moving boxes lined the hallway. Closet doors stood open. Shelves that had once held books and decorations were nearly empty. The home felt strangely quiet, not because anyone had asked for silence, but because there was little left to say. Ryan spent every evening carrying boxes to the garage while Olivia searched online for affordable furniture and household essentials. Reality had become far more expensive than either of them had imagined. The apartment they had rented was modest, a 2-bedroom unit on the opposite side of town. It was clean and comfortable, but much smaller than the spacious home they had taken for granted. Every new expense reminded them of how much Evelyn had quietly provided over the past year: security deposits, moving truck fees, utility connection charges, monthly rent, home insurance, internet installation. The list seemed endless. One evening, Ryan spread several bills across the kitchen table. "I didn't realize how quickly everything adds up," he admitted. Olivia looked exhausted. "We'll figure it out." Ryan nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "We could have saved far more money if we'd focused on our own future instead of assuming we'd stay here forever." Olivia didn't answer. For the first time since receiving the legal notice, she seemed willing to admit that their plans had been built on assumptions rather than reality. Evelyn continued living peacefully. She kept her daily routines unchanged. Every morning, she watered the flowers George had planted years earlier. She baked fresh bread every Sunday. She attended her book club twice a month and volunteered regularly at the botanical gardens. The house slowly began feeling like home again. Without arguments echoing through the rooms, she could once again hear birds singing outside the kitchen window and the grandfather clock chiming in the hallway. She hadn't realized how much stress had quietly settled into her life until it was gone. One afternoon, Ryan found an old photo album while packing a storage cabinet. Curious, he opened it. Inside were photographs from nearly every stage of his childhood. There he was learning to ride a bicycle while George steadied the seat. Another picture showed Evelyn cheering during his high school graduation. There were birthday parties, camping trips, family vacations, and countless ordinary afternoons that now felt priceless. Ryan sat on the floor, turning each page slowly. He remembered how hard his parents had worked. George often worked overtime. Evelyn managed the household budget with incredible discipline, carefully saving money while making sure Ryan never felt deprived. Only now did he understand the sacrifices hidden behind those happy memories. His parents hadn't built their home through luck. They had earned every brick. That evening, Ryan knocked gently on Evelyn's bedroom door. She invited him inside. He carried the photo album in his hands. "I found this today." Evelyn smiled softly as she recognized it. "I haven't looked through that in years." Ryan placed it on her desk. "I forgot how much you and Dad did for me. You were our son. I think somewhere along the way I stopped appreciating that." Evelyn listened quietly. "I let convenience replace gratitude." She looked into his eyes. "People sometimes mistake generosity for obligation." "I did, and that realization matters." Ryan nodded. "I should have protected you when Olivia crossed the line. You should have protected what was right." There was no anger in her voice, only honesty. He swallowed hard. "I don't expect everything to be forgiven. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. I know, but learning from mistakes is always possible." Ryan managed a small smile. "I'd like to become someone Dad would still be proud of." Evelyn reached across the desk and gently squeezed his hand. "I believe you can." Across the hallway, Olivia overheard part of their conversation. She remained standing outside for several moments before quietly returning downstairs. Later that night, she found Evelyn alone in the kitchen preparing tea. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Finally, Olivia broke the silence. "I owe you an apology." Evelyn looked up. "I'm listening." Olivia took a deep breath. "When we moved in, I convinced myself that this house would eventually become ours." She lowered her eyes. "I stopped seeing your generosity as a gift." Evelyn waited patiently. "I treated you like an obstacle instead of the person who welcomed us." Her voice cracked slightly. "I'm truly sorry." The apology was simple. There were no excuses. No attempts to shift blame, only regret. Evelyn nodded slowly. "I appreciate hearing that. I don't expect you to trust me again. Trust takes time. I understand." For the first time in many months, the conversation ended without bitterness. Some wounds would heal slowly. Others might always leave scars. But at least the truth had finally been spoken aloud. As April drew closer, the moving boxes multiplied. Soon, the house would once again belong to the person who had built it with patience, sacrifice, and unwavering determination. And this time, everyone living under its roof fully understood exactly why. April arrived with gentle sunshine and blooming flowers. The maple tree in the front yard was covered with fresh green leaves, and colorful tulips lined the walkway that George had planted years before. The house looked peaceful again, as though it had quietly waited for spring to restore its warmth. Inside, the final stages of moving were underway. Cardboard boxes filled the foyer one last time. Furniture was wrapped in blankets, and the sound of tape sealing moving cartons echoed through the rooms. The house that had once felt crowded now seemed to breathe again with every item carried outside. Ryan worked steadily from sunrise until late afternoon. He loaded boxes into the moving truck without complaint, stopping only long enough to wipe the sweat from his forehead. The past few months had changed him more than he ever expected. He had learned that providing for a family required more than dreams. It demanded responsibility, planning, and respect. Olivia remained unusually quiet throughout the day. Gone was the confidence that had once led her to redesign rooms and make decisions without permission. She packed the last of their belongings carefully, avoiding unnecessary conversation. Every empty shelf reminded her of how badly she had misjudged the woman who had opened her home without asking for anything in return. By early evening, only a few boxes remained. The moving truck stood in the driveway, nearly full. Ryan carried the final carton to the front porch before walking back toward Evelyn, who stood beside the flower bed watering newly planted roses. He paused for a moment before speaking. "Everything's loaded." Evelyn turned off the hose and smiled gently. "I hope the apartment serves you well. I think it will." He looked toward the house. "It won't be as comfortable as this place. It doesn't have to be." Ryan looked confused. "What makes a house comfortable isn't its size." She glanced toward the front door. "It's the respect shared inside it." Ryan lowered his eyes. "I understand that now." A few minutes later, Olivia walked slowly across the yard. She stopped several feet away from Evelyn. "I wanted to say goodbye properly." Evelyn nodded. "I'm glad you did." Olivia took a slow breath. "When we moved in, I thought success meant getting everything we wanted as quickly as possible." She shook her head. "I never stopped to think about what someone else had sacrificed to build it." Evelyn listened quietly. "I can't change what happened." "No, but I can promise it won't happen again." Evelyn offered a small smile. "I hope you keep that promise." Olivia extended her hand. After a brief pause, Evelyn accepted it. The handshake lasted only a few seconds, but it marked the end of months filled with resentment and misunderstanding. Neither woman pretended everything had been repaired. Some trust would take years to rebuild. Even so, they parted with honesty rather than anger. Ryan walked toward the porch holding a small ring of keys. He placed them gently into Evelyn's hand. "I believe these belong to you." She closed her fingers around them. They always did. His eyes filled with emotion. "I'm sorry I stayed silent when you needed me most." Evelyn looked at her son for a long moment. "I raised you to be kind. You did. I also raised you to stand up for what's right." He nodded slowly. "I forgot that. But you've remembered. I won't make the same mistake again." She stepped forward and hugged him tightly. The embrace lasted only a moment, yet it carried years of love, disappointment, forgiveness, and hope. When they finally stepped apart, Ryan smiled through tearful eyes. "May I still visit?" "You'll always be welcome." She gently touched his shoulder. "But remember something. I will. My home is open to people who enter it with respect." Ryan nodded. "I understand." The truck engine started moments later. Ryan climbed behind the wheel while Olivia settled into the passenger seat. Before driving away, both of them looked back at the house one final time. It no longer represented an inheritance waiting to be claimed. It represented decades of sacrifice, discipline, and unwavering commitment. As the truck disappeared around the corner, silence returned to the neighborhood. Evelyn stood alone in the driveway until it was out of sight. Then she walked slowly back inside. The house felt wonderfully still. Sunlight poured through the front windows, filling the hallway with a warm golden glow. She unlocked the storage cabinet in her bedroom and carefully removed the framed family photographs she had packed away months earlier. One by one, she returned each picture to its proper place. George smiled from a photograph taken on their 25th anniversary. Another frame showed Ryan as a little boy holding his first baseball glove. A third captured the three of them standing proudly in front of the house shortly after paying off the mortgage. Those memories had never belonged in storage. They belonged on the walls of the home they had built together. After hanging the final frame, Evelyn stepped back and admired the hallway. Everything looked exactly as it should. She settled into George's favorite armchair beside the living room window, with a cup of fresh tea resting on the table nearby. Outside, a gentle breeze rustled the new spring leaves, while birds sang from the maple tree. For the first time in a very long while, there was no tension, no uncertainty, and no fear of losing what she had worked so hard to create. She had protected more than a house. She had protected her independence, her dignity, and the values that George had spent a lifetime helping her build. A home could be inherited. Money could be earned again. Furniture could be replaced. But respect was something that had to be given freely, never demanded or taken by force. As the afternoon sunlight filled the quiet room, Evelyn smiled peacefully. The house was finally home again.